All right,
Okay.
we're rolling.
All right. Welcome to an extra special, for so many reasons special, episode of Central Line here on site at AhaCon 2023 in San Diego. We have I was going to say a non-veterinary guest, but I feel like you are basically part of the veterinary family at this point.
I feel a part of the team and family. I love it. I love these people.
Yeah. So this is the magic behind every episode of Central Line. Casey is basically the guy behind the curtain who is making things happen. And if it weren't for you, there would be no podcast.
Thank you. I am really honored to be the producer on this show for the last couple years with Central Line. Definitely not a vet med expert, but I think we can definitely have an intelligent conversation about how those working in vet med can maybe get themselves out there a little bit more by opening up and either joining a podcast as a guest, starting their own, and then we could talk about some of the value of why you would want to do that in terms of repurposing like clips from your podcast into social media and all that type of thing.
Yeah, I think that would be amazing because I know from my own experience that if you listen to podcasts you're a pretty dedicated listener, an engaged listener, it means you really love the podcast medium because people either are like into the podcast or they're not. And a lot of people just, they just connect with it in some way. And quite frequently, I feel like they think, what would it be like if I were on a podcast or if I had my own show? And it really isn't a huge leap to doing that, but it can seem really insurmountable. And so it seemed like while we were here in the same room, it would be a good idea to talk about that.
Yeah. And the number one thing for feedback I tend to hear with people that actually do join someone else's podcast, specifically yours, is or people that, podcasts that I've heard this, it's just, oh, that was super easy. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that it would just be like a conversation. And you're like,
right.
Well, yeah, if you're a guest or hosting a really good podcast, that's what it should just be. It should be just an authentic conversation. And I think having the back end piece where someone's editing it really helps a lot too, because it's just like, even if there's no edits and you just nailed it on the first take, just having that feeling in the back of your head like, oh, I can screw up a little bit here and that editor will have my back or someone else on the back end is editing it. That I think is really helpful when you join a show like Central Line or some of the other great podcasts out there in vet med. If there's someone on the back end editing it and that going in as a guest, it just puts you a little bit more at ease as, oh, this isn't live. I don't have to nail it on the first take.
Yeah, totally. And then once you've done that a lot, like if you're hosting the podcast and I've noticed like as we go on, it gets easier and easier for me to not feel anxious about that. And so then like we did our live stream yesterday with Josh Weissman and Debbie Boone. Casey had 682 wires coming in and out of his board. And we were live streaming to LinkedIn and there was a room full of people listening to us. And it was not scary because, well, first of all, because their guests were so easy. Second of all, because I knew Casey was sitting there with his board and all of his wires and knew what he was doing. But the interviewing part was not scary at all because it's become very comfortable to just talk to somebody in that way and like forget that the microphone is there. And I think people who really like talking to people, podcast is just that. It's just that. And it gives you a really good excuse to talk to a lot of interesting people. So selfishly, that's why I love it.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's like this in vet med, but it's certainly like this in other fields where if you go to apply for a job, the first thing that someone does is kind of Google you and check out your public social profiles. And they kind of want to see, I know I can't speak specifically to vet med, but I have a hunch that this is similar in vet med, is they're going to want to see you kind of putting yourself out there as professional, maybe on Instagram, maybe on LinkedIn, maybe on YouTube. And that is, that's something that I know hiring managers are looking to see. They kind of want to see, how's this person, how's their public profile? The first thing we do is Google someone. So if you're a guest on a podcast, it just provides you with a way to have some clips of yourself and what you're all about, putting it out there publicly, because whether we like it or not, social media is a huge reality of this professional environment.
Yeah, and putting yourself out there publicly also shows that you're not, you're able to present yourself in a way that is professional and acceptable to an employer. They don't have to worry about you. And I think social media can be a real disaster for some people. If they have had stuff on their social media they wouldn't want an employer to see, it can be really hard to hide that stuff. Yeah. And podcasting and being on YouTube and stuff is the opposite. It makes you really easy to find, and it also sort of gives people a window into who you are. So even if they're not interested at all in whether you can make content on YouTube, like, they can see what kind of person you are based on the content you've made. And if you're looking for a non-clinical career, so if you're looking to branch into industry or nonprofit work, like organization work, like at AHA, it is really, really helpful to see somebody who's a self-starter and who is actually taking it upon themselves to create something.
Yeah. For sure. I want to touch on something that I heard you talk a little bit about in an earlier podcast that you recorded here at AHACon. And that was something that pertains to this question of whether someone in vet med should start their own podcast. And it's about kind of having an abundance mentality. So someone might be like thinking, oh, there's so many podcasts out there. What could I possibly bring to the table?
We've had that conversation, you and me.
Yeah. And the truth of the reality is, well, someone's not doing a podcast in your own voice. They're not bringing your unique perspective to the table. And also having an abundance mentality is like, well, there's more room for my stuff and for my voice to be out there. And I totally am a huge proponent of that. And I think that's why you and I would both encourage anyone listening in vet med or any field to seriously consider starting their own podcast.
Yeah, totally. And, I have had my own podcast before I came to AHA and did Centraline. And I did, my own editing and social media and stuff like that. And it's some work, like Casey. The reason that we're so grateful for you is that it's not that we couldn't do like a good enough job of editing the podcast and like getting it out there. Like, the software exists that you can just do that stuff. You don't have to be an expert or a sound engineer or a tech wizard to do that stuff. But you take it to a level that I wouldn't be able to do on my own. You make the sound better. You make recommendations that I wouldn't know to make to myself or to somebody else. You help me like troubleshoot tech issues. Like if there's an echo or something in an episode, you're like, ping me next time and we'll figure it out. And that stuff, it may not be something that we need every single second, but knowing that support is there is extremely valuable. And you've also just been a really good sounding board for like, if I'm feeling a little bit like, are we doing the right thing? Is anybody listening? And you have been a really good sort of mirror to say, well, I'm not in this industry and here's what I see,
It does help to come from an outsider perspective and just come in with a fresh perspective on, okay, well, this is kind of what conventional wisdom would say from a media perspective or a podcast perspective, because my background is journalism, mass communications, that type of thing. And just coming into it with a fresh non-subject matter expert perspective is very helpful. Having said that, if you are thinking about doing a podcast and you're in vet med, come to events like this, come to AHACon, meet amazing people, and you build that network of people to bounce ideas off of. I'm a huge proponent of networking, and networking done in a non-sleazy way is the most beautiful thing. And that's how you make the most important relationships happen, coming to AHACon and saying, hey, I know you have an amazing podcast, Katie Berlin, or whomever, can we like exchange contact info? Because I'm thinking of starting one and I just would like to pick your brain on it. That's it. Like, no expectations for anyone to get anything out of that interaction. It's just like, hey, pure networking. Like, I just want to pick your brain. And hey, by the way, if there's anything that, you ever want to ask me about, I'm an expert in XYZ, just pick up the phone, text me, or give me an email sometime. So that's why I'm a huge proponent of coming to events like this, meeting people and getting that, like you're saying, getting that fresh set of eyes on things.
Yeah, definitely. I have a friend, Bruce Franke. He's a practice owner in Michigan, and he has a podcast actually for his clinic, which is pretty cool. Like it's a small operation. I think his daughter does the editing, and cool. He basically talks about like common medical problems. He also interviews people. I think we talked on it one time, and he will have experts come in sometimes, but sometimes it's also just him. And he has little cards, like business cards that he hands out that have the podcast, like a QR code, and he'll just hand them out. So if he's talking to somebody about allergies, instead of like having to do the 45-minute like spiel about all the allergies, he could be like, listen to this episode, and just gives them a card.
That's huge.
And it's really cool. And like, is it a huge thing that he's expecting to like go viral and make money on? Absolutely not. It's work. He doesn't keep up a lot of episodes, but like it serves a really great purpose for him and his clients. And podcasts can be just that.
Yeah.
Like they could be anything.
Definitely. And I want to keep this conversation high level, not get too into the weeds, but I will say one thing from like a technical strategy perspective. If you do start your own podcast, and this is something Central Line has done from day one, is have the video out there. Like take the time to, because if you do a remote podcast on Zoom, they're already recording the video. Everyone has a webcam. If you're in a setting like this, take good time to watch some YouTube videos and find out how you do an in-person podcast, which, by the way, is a little more technically intimidating than just doing something over Zoom. So I highly recommend starting with Zoom. If you're in person, you can shoot it with your iPhone and just make sure that you have the sound being somewhat decent quality. But I always do recommend taking the time to try to get a video component in there, because traditionally podcasts were always just like that audio medium. But if you look at the most popular podcasts now, I would say 90 to 95% of them, there's still a few that don't have a video component, because you're not really repeating the upfront work. You're just, recording it as a video and stripping out the audio for the podcast apps. Again, I'm getting a little techie, but apologies. But then I just think it's really important that you have some sort of video component, because you're going to want it out there on YouTube, and you're probably going to want to clip some of the cool highlights from that conversation and put those out on Instagram or whatever platform that you find to be most useful.
Yeah, totally. And that's one of the things that I love the most about it. And like being at a conference like this, it's really funny. I was in the elevator the other day, and I had just had headphones on for hours because we were doing this. And I also have like headphones that I wear on the plane, which I was just on for 5.5 hours, like flying here. And they're like big headphones like this. And I got in the elevator, and there was somebody there who, he didn't have a badge on or anything, but he just looked at me, and then he's like, "Oh, I didn't recognize you without your headphones on." And I was like,
that's funny.
What was he talking about? Like, did he mean like 5 minutes ago when I was recording, or did he mean on the plane? And then I realized that he sees my face on his feed all the time because we have clips from Central Line.
That's right.
And he actually watches, but he also just sees, in his Facebook feed or whatever, that I just go. And I've had that happen a fair amount of times. And one of the things I like best about it is that these might be people who listen to the podcast. They don't watch it. We don't actually have a ton of people that watch the podcast. The majority of people who tune into Central Line are doing it audio only. But seeing us, the guest and me, crossing their feeds like in a visual way on, twice weekly or whatever, when our social media team promotes it, that keeps it front of mind, and it helps them sort of feel more connected to us because they know what we look like. Yeah. And I think that really, really is so helpful. Like, I hate being on video. Hate it.
Yeah.
And like,
I get it.
Yeah, I can't watch them. Like, you send them to me and then I just listen to them. But I think I really do agree with you. I think it's so beneficial.
That's one last thing I definitely want to point out is we might not have it be in our comfort zone to put ourselves out there. I personally struggle with it too. I don't want to be like I don't know. I've just always, I think, been more comfortable just flying under the radar and like But the reality is you do have to kind of build that skill set. You have to be comfortable with being out there, being on video, having conversations, and building up some sort of social media presence. I mean, I'm saying you have to. You don't have to, but
none of this
it helps. It helps. You know, it's an important skill set to build, because there is definitely some real world carryover when when you spend as much time as you do engaging with people on a podcast. That's really helpful in face-to-face communication.
Totally.
And we're huge components of being good communicators.
Yeah. I mean, so much of what we talk about on Central Line is about communication.
Yes.
And I'm always talking, like you were just saying, networking done right is so beautiful. And it really becomes more community than schmoozing, which is what people think of when they think of networking. And like, coming to a conference like this is so easy now, because I'm like, well, if I can make conversation with, hundreds of people like on a Zoom call that I don't know or that I don't know that well, and we have to talk about things for an hour and then like cut it off, then coming here and just like talking to actual people about their lives is just really fun. And so if you're looking to build a network, build a community, I think podcasting is a really great way. I also will say that, and AHA is one thing, because AHA has a reputation. It's been around for 90 years. It was respected long before I ever got here, and I've appreciated that it carries with it kind of a gravity and a set of expectations already that I didn't have to create.
Totally.
But even for my own podcast, I had really amazing people say absolutely when I asked them if they wanted to be on it. And they never asked me like, well, how many people are going to listen? Or like, what kind of reach do you get? If somebody asks you that, they probably have other agenda anyway. But they're so nice about it.
Yeah. No, that's a huge piece of it. If you're going to be on someone's show, I mean, you wouldn't ask about analytics and metrics and stuff like that. You're kind of in it for the wrong reason. Yeah, exactly. There's numerous reasons why it's beneficial. It helps with networking. You can do networking through a podcast. It's maybe just like a byproduct of the podcast. Oh, by the way, if you are a guest or you're hosting one, you do get to meet some amazing people. So it is definitely a byproduct of it. But yeah, if someone's interested in it strictly for the metrics and how many people are going to see it, you might be doing it for the wrong reasons. But yeah, just keep in mind that there's so many different ways to use that base podcast. You can use it as, social media clips, as we talked about. You can use it. I know that you've used our transcripts from many of these episodes, and you've used those in publications. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we have a column now every month in Trends magazine. So Trends is an industry magazine published by AHA, and it's a member benefit to get it free. So every member of AHA can get it mailed to them for free, but it's also available online for members, and then you can also pay for subscription. And in that magazine, we have a column every single month where we take a podcast that we've done, take the transcript and trim it down to about 2,000 words or so. And a lot of times it'll fit with sort of whatever theme is that we're talking about that month. And it's a nice way to get people introduced to, because our speakers, our guests on the podcast know so much. They are experts in the field. They have stories that they want to tell, and they don't mind sharing that can really kind of form a connection between them and a lot of people who might not otherwise hear those stories. And this is just another way to get that connection out there, because not everybody listens or watches. They like to read.
Totally. Yeah. No, that's a great way. And having the transcript from every episode of Central Line was an important thing to us in the beginning, and that's something we've stayed consistent with, is because we want to make sure it's as accessible as possible, these conversations, and also we recognize the fact that some people are just speed readers. They can consume content faster by reading it, and some people can consume these conversations fastest by listening to the podcast on like double, triple speed while they're on the treadmill or something. High achieving individuals come to mind, but however,
there's none of those listening.
Yeah, right. But yeah, that's just what's cool about podcasts. It's there's so many different ways to. I mean, you want to meet people where they're at on how they want to consume it. So the podcast, especially when you have the transcripts available, allows that, I mean, if you're doing the transcripts, you're doing the YouTube video, and you're doing the audio only that you can listen to on literally triple, quadruple speed on Spotify, I think they have, you're really helping to meet people where they're at.
This AHA podcast is brought to you by CareCredit. CareCredit understands that all veterinary teams are busier than ever. To help patients get the care they need, the CareCredit Health and Pet Care Credit Card allows clients to access a budget-friendly financing experience anytime, from anywhere on their own smart device. They can learn, see if they pre-qualify, apply, and even pay if approved, all on that smart device. With just a tap, they have a friendly, contactless way to pay over time for the services and treatments their pet needs, whether it be a general, referring, or specialty hospital, as long as they accept the CareCredit credit card. Yes. That is something, that's a trap that I've fallen into many times that I feel like you have helped me avoid, which is thinking that everybody is like me and everybody consumes content like me. Yeah. And I like the story. Like I love Rich Roll's podcast. You know, they're like 2.5 hour episodes, and he like gets to know every corner of that human during that 2.5 hours. And they get really deep and intimate, those conversations. And I do not speed them up because I want to hear that. I don't listen all at once necessarily. I listen on a long run. They're really good long run fodder. But, but hearing just the inflection in people's voices and how comfortable they get, just sort of telling these vulnerabilities that are like, why would you want to tell a stranger that? But they're telling you that through your earphones or like on your computer. And that that sense of like, I'm there in the room with them and I know this person, that's why I listen to podcasts. But as you have pointed out to me astutely, that is not everybody's bag. Yeah. And so while I'm never going to be a 20-minute podcast person, like here's your 5 tips, like goodbye, it is helpful to have takeaways from the podcast for people that aren't in it necessarily for the inflection and the gravity and the story. They might be in it to get something and take away from it, and we want to provide that too.
I think that's a really good note to end on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't top that.
Well, so here's something to end on, because I want people to feel like if somebody's listening to this episode and have gotten this far, they're probably like, yeah, I actually kind of want to do this. What is your recommended first step?
I always like when I'm learning stuff, listen, I'm not a DIY person, like around the home. I'm not going to be able to fix much. But I learn everything from a technical standpoint, essentially everything, with the exception of people that I'm lucky enough to talk to and ask questions to who are technical experts. But I learn everything from, honestly, YouTube videos and the information that's already out there on Mr. Google. Like, that is where you want to just start. Just start with, like, as simple as how to podcast. And there's so much great, simplified videos out there to do it, and those ones that rise to the top are literally the best ones. Say what you want about the Google algorithm and the YouTube algorithm, yes, it misses the mark often, but when it comes to like learning how to do a podcast, the videos that come to the top when you search that are going to be where you want to start. And that is literally it, just having the patience to watch those videos and learn how to do it yourself.
Yeah. And there are, I think, programs now that will allow you to like create the podcast and put it out there. Like Anchor, I think, lets you do everything all at once.
Spotify for podcasters is what it's called now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, there's no Anchor anymore.
Yeah,
I'm behind because of you.
I mean, you have to like really want to keep up with this stuff.
Yeah,
which is what I do.
Well, the last time I made my own podcast, there was Anchor, and now there's Spotify for podcasters. Yeah, but I don't know that because I stopped making my own, and now at AHA we have Casey. And they can also probably contact you if they want production help making one. Absolutely, yes. We'll put my contact in the description. Yes. I'm happy to talk with anyone in this great community just to answer some questions on what I might be able to help with. Thank you. Yeah, of course. Casey, thank you for this. Thank you. Thank you for coming out from behind the scenes to do this. Yeah, I mean, if it's helpful, I'm happy to do it. I can't overstate how helpful you've been in this whole process. And I really mean it when like Central Line would not exist without your help.
I appreciate that.
And I'm really excited that you got to come to San Diego all the way from Baltimore.
Yeah.
And I really, really am appreciative of everything you've taught me. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. Even if it's on 3 times speed, I'm really curious to what I sound like on 3 times speed, but I don't think I'll listen to it. Yeah. We'll catch you next time on Central Line.